And our fourth main topic today gets submitted to us by Jerry Leung, who writes, "Hey, John and Rob," and obviously Rob's never here on Thursdays. So the Rotten Tomatoes score for Eternals is sitting at 64% currently, making it officially the worst critic-rated MCU movie ever, even behind Thor 2. I know you guys liked Eternals. Is there a reason you think why the rating is this bad? How will it affect the box office? All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. Appreciate that. And yes, now look, you guys know I've seen Eternals. Rob saw Eternals. Rob liked Eternals more than I did. I really liked Eternals. It's not my number one comic book film of the year. I still prefer Shang-Chi over it, but there you have it. But I think it's a very strong movie. I think it's a really good movie. I think it's very ambitious. It expands the Marvel Universe more than any movie in the MCU has done so far. It even expands on the whole creation idea of the MCU in there. It's a massive game-changing movie for the MCU. Again, not my favorite movie this year, not my favorite comic book film this year, but I quite enjoyed it. But you guys will remember that when I saw it, I said that this is the first fundamentally different in its DNA MCU movie that we've had so far. Because while all the Marvel films are very different from each other, like Civil War is very different from Ant-Man, Ant-Man is very different from Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange is very different from the first Iron Man, and so on and so forth. All the MCU films do a really good job of diversifying and feeling very different and fresh and unique. But when you walk out of any of those movies, while they are all different and fresh and unique, they still all had the Marvel DNA. Like, you still came out knowing and feeling like you just watched an MCU movie, right? It felt like an MCU movie, as radically different as it was, as radically different as Shang-Chi is from Endgame. They still feel like they are the Marvel DNA. And I said that Eternals is not that. Eternals does not have the DNA of a Marvel movie. It is a Marvel movie. It's definitively a Marvel movie, but it does not have that Marvel movie DNA. And I said, I don't know how other people are going to respond to that. Honestly, I did not know how people, particularly your average MCU movie-going fans, like fans who are going to go into Eternals expecting a certain experience with that familiar Marvel DNA of a movie, and they're not going to get it. And I don't know how people will respond to that. And sure enough, as you go over and start looking at the critic ratings right now, the thing's sitting at 64%, which makes it the lowest rated Marvel MCU movie to date, which is hilarious when you're like, wait a minute, a fresh rating is the lowest rated MCU movie? Yeah. I mean, that tells you something about the strength of the MCU. When a movie where still the majority of the critics like it, and it's still, certified fresh for now, when it's still ranked as fresh and all that kind of stuff, and that out of 26, 27 movies is your lowest rated one. I think there are a lot of movie franchises that would kill to say a 63, 64, 65, 66% rating as our lowest rated movie. I think there's a lot of film franchises that would kill for that. But still, it is right now, and it can fluctuate a little bit up, it can fluctuate a little bit down. As of right now, it is the lowest rated MCU movie so far. So the question becomes, why? Why is Eternals the lowest critically rated film they've ever done so far? Well, the obvious and most direct and most relevant answer to that question is because as of right now, 36% of the critics don't like it. That's why. It's the lowest rated MCU movie so far because 36% of the critics who have gone and see this movie didn't enjoy it. It's just that simple. That's why. Now you may ask the question, but John, why didn't those 36% of critics like it? Well, film is subjective. Every single one of them will have a different reason. Maybe the length didn't work for them. Maybe the dialogue didn't work for them. Maybe the new mythology they introduced didn't quite click with them. Maybe the dynamics between the characters didn't click for them. Maybe the fact that it didn't feel like your traditional Marvel film, maybe that rubbed them the wrong way. Maybe they just thought the story didn't work for them. Listen, for every single one of those 36% of critics that didn't like it, they're each going to have their own individual reason. And I think what we as fans often struggle, we want to find the one magic bullet. What was the one reason? What's the one reason that critics didn't like this movie? Well, I think it's important because I had a bunch of people writing in yesterday saying, John, why do you think the critics didn't like Eternals? And I'm like, well, first of all, a majority of the critics do like it. So let's be clear about that. The majority of critics like this movie. But why is it the lowest rated one they've had so far? And the reality is there's no one answer. The 36, 37, 38%, maybe it'll be as high as 39%, maybe as low as 30%, whatever. But each one of those critics are individual people going to a movie, and a movie's going to hit them in a certain way, and they're either going to like it or not like it. Just like for me, I went in, and for my own personal reasons, I watched the film, and it's like, wow, this really works for me. I love the mythology building. I mean, I think they did a bad job with the villains. I thought the whole thing about the deviants was kind of wasted, not done very well. I'm not going to go into specifics because I know none of you have seen the film yet. But yeah, there are things about this film that didn't work for me. I don't think it's the best comic book film of the year, but for me, enough things in that movie really worked for me that I walked out having had a really good time. And I had a good time again the next time I went to go see it. I've seen it twice so far. But that's how it hit me. And I wondered, coming out the first time, I wonder how people are going to respond to this. And because I'm not really so sure. Look, at the end of the day, I still kind of side with the majority of critics on this. I think this is a good film. And I think this movie, more than most MCU movies, is going to have wider reaching consequences in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, I think this movie is going, and the events of this movie are going to change the MCU and what directions the MCU can go in far more than any other MCU movie ever before. That doesn't mean it's the best movie that they've ever made, but I think you can really feel like it's really going in a different direction. I absolutely want to see these characters return. I love a lot of these characters. I mean, not every one of the Eternals characters totally knocked it out of the park for me, but the vast majority of them did. And I really do want to see them return. So yeah, it's interesting to see. And you know, what I'm really curious about though right now, here's what I'm actually really curious about. I think it's very interesting to see that it is now the lowest critic rated MCU film ever. But here's what I'm more interested to see. And that's going to be the audience rating. I am very curious to see what is the audience going to think of this. Where's the audience? Because honestly, I have no idea. I didn't have any idea what the audiences would think about it after I saw it the first time. I had no idea what I think the audience rating on it's going to be after I saw it for the second time. I'm sitting here today now, a week or so later, and I still have no idea what it's going to be. Even after, look, honestly, I am not going to be surprised. I am not going to be surprised in the least if once the audience ratings start coming out for this movie, if it's in the high 80s. I won't be surprised. Because I see a lot in the movie that's good and enjoyable, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the audience rating's in the high 80s. Yet I wouldn't be surprised at all if the audience rating starts coming up and it's in the mid 50s. John, that's quite a range. I know, but that's it exactly. I would be shocked if this was at like a 98% critic rating or a 98% audience rating. I can't see that happening. I would be shocked if it was like a 30% audience rating. I can't see that happening. But honestly, I am not going to be surprised if it's as high as like 85, 86%. And I'm not going to be surprised if it's as low as like 54 or 55%. I really don't know where it's going to land. Because again, it's just one of those movies that it's really all going to depend on how it hits with the audience. And I just don't know how it will. But the one thing that we know for sure, it is the lowest rated, critic rated. It is the lowest critic rated MCU project so far. And even though it's still the majority of the critics like it, even though it's still positive ratings, even though all of that, in a Marvel Cinematic Universe where we're all just accustomed to seeing 80%, 90%, 95%, we're just accustomed to that. Like a Marvel Cinematic movie comes out, it is universally beloved. I mean, unless you're Thor 2 or Iron, whatever. But as soon as a Marvel Cinematic movie comes out, it's so good and just hits all those notes that all the critics and all the audiences like it. And that's not going to be Eternals. It's not going to be Eternals. So it's going to be interesting to see. Let me just ask you guys right now. Let me put together a poll in the live chat. And I'm going to ask, what will the AD or audience rating or AR, audience rating, be for Eternals? I'm going to give a couple of ranges here. I'm going to say, will it be 0 to 25%? Will it be 26% to 50%? Will it be 51% to 74%? Or will it be 75% to 100%? Okay, that's the question. I'm not asking you how good you think the movie's going to be. So for those of you watching live, the poll just went up. And I know I could have pared this down a bit, but where do you think the audience rating is going to end up? And right now, we've already got 200 and something of you guys have already voted. Right now, 57% of you are saying 51 to 74% is where the audience rating is going to come. 36% of you still think it's going to come in at 75% to 100%. 8% of you think 26% to 50%, and 1% of you think 0 to 25. So it's interesting. So it looks like the majority of you guys right now are thinking the 51 to 74%. We're approaching 700 votes now in there. 51 to 74% is kind of where it's holding. 56% of you believe 51 to 74%. 34% of you are voting 75% to 100. So that's interesting. It's interesting to see. Double B Studios is saying 95%. Listen, I mean, that would be great. I would love it if the audience loved it that much, but I can't see this movie getting an audience rating of 95%. I will be shocked. I will be shocked. I don't think it's going to be below 50, but I can't see it being 95 either. So I don't know. So anyway, question is for you guys. What do you think about this? Eternals has come out, a movie that we have heard Kevin Feige kind of maybe whispering Best Picture nomination aspirations, a movie that some of us, including me, have heard insiders at Disney thinking this was the best Marvel movie they've ever made, all that kind of stuff. It is now officially, as of right now, the lowest critically rated MCU film ever made, even though it's still positively rated, but it's still the lowest. What do you guys think about this? Where do you think the Eternals is going to stand when the audience ratings start coming out? Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.